Every civil engineering firm looking to grow today must focus on two things: culture and cohesiveness. The challenge is that these things are tough to wrap our heads around and really grow continuously. Well, in today's episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, I am thrilled to have with me Jeremy Billig. Jeremy is the CEO and president of McLaren Engineering Group, and Jeremy is going to talk about how McLaren ran a one-day event that helped them to really build these two things: culture and cohesiveness. Now, before I jump in with Jeremy, a quick word from our sponsor, Pennoni. Since Pennoni's founding more than 5 decades ago, their clients trust Pennoni's commitment to elevating the impact of projects in the communities they serve. By partnering with their clients, they establish relationships that create trust and longevity. Pennoni approaches the start of every project as the beginning of a collaboration. With the rapid change in technology, Pennoni's clients know they are getting innovative methods in delivering quality services for smart, sustainable, and resilient solutions. Pennoni is relentless in their aim to bring fresh perspective and new technologies. Pennoni measures achievement in innovation, efficiency, and excellence. Its milestones are bigger than any one project, and every project affects the community, no matter how large or small. For more information, visit Pennoni.com. That's Pennoni.com. All right, now I'm excited to welcome my guest onto the show today. Jeremy Billig is the CEO and president at McLaren Engineering Group. Jeremy, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thanks, Anthony. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. I've had the pleasure of kind of knowing Jeremy for a long time. We were both young engineers together, working in companies that were probably around the corner from each other for some time, and did a lot of extracurricular stuff together. And had the chance of doing some stuff recently with McLaren through EMI, which we'll get into a little bit. But it's happy to have Jeremy on the show here and just talk a little bit about McLaren and what they're doing in terms of kind of culture building and things of that nature. But Jeremy, just to get us started, for those that are not familiar with McLaren Engineering Group, maybe you could just talk a little bit about where you're located, the services you offer, your size.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anthony. So yeah, we're about 210 strong, predominantly located in the East Coast, New York, Connecticut, Albany, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, all the way down to Florida, a few offices in between. We have some folks out west as well, but we're really working internationally and nationally. Our company is really founded on civil and structural engineering at its core, but with that core line of services, we support everything from structural, civil, facade envelope work. We do some unique work in the marine and coastal areas, as well as geotechnical. One of our fun to talk about groups is our entertainment group, which does everything from Broadway shows to touring concerts. But you name it, we'll do it. We don't get into architecture or MEP services of that nature. But, most of our work tends to be in the Northeast. And just a great company all around.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, known Jeremy for a while, known McLaren for a while, and they do some pretty interesting, exciting work, like Jeremy mentioned, with the entertainment stuff, the underwater stuff, some of the diving stuff. So definitely some unique services that are always interesting to learn about, kind of keeping up with them. So Jeremy, let's talk a little bit about your career journey to date. I think a lot of civil engineers, or just engineers in general, we start our careers in a very technical nature, and a lot of us kind of have aspirations to go into management and kind of maybe get to that high level of management one day, like you've gotten to in your career. Talk a little bit about your journey and how that progressed and how it evolved for you in terms of going from technical into management. And just curious, I think people want to learn, and they hope to take steps like you.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I kind of feel like sometimes life pushes you in a certain direction. I was fortunate enough to start our entertainment group, where my boss and mentor was just great, and he allowed myself and the team the opportunity to take those chances, right? So very early on, there was exposure to clients, things like writing proposals, and that's where I think I got that first, bite at the apple, that first taste of what success can feel like and what sort of my version of success was. And it was kind of simple. It was that satisfied client. It was that email of good job, or that you did a good job, here's another project. So that really opened my eyes into, okay, what else is there to do in terms of growing myself? So I found that technical over time came somewhat naturally, as it often does for us engineers. But I felt the sort of business development and working with clients and working with my peers, there was so much more to do there. So very quickly, and with the guidance and uh, willingness of my supervisor to take such chances, I got more into client management, working with clients, somewhat developing my own thing. And I would say that's what gave me that opportunity to get a little bit less, a little bit more out of the technical and client management mentorship. So it's very quick that I would say, doing less of the technical myself and managing more of the technical quality control, but doing that interface with clients. And in the entertainment industry, that was very easy because we're moving very fast. So you have that need to be dealing with clients, make sure the product deliverables are getting out, and the entertainment clients, even a little bit more so than some of the other typical engineering clients, have very specific expectations. So, and they are very honest and candid with their feedback. So you get that real time feedback of, okay, I did good here, I did bad here. So that was allowed me, I think, on an accelerated pace, perhaps to hone in on my client management skills and project management skills. And so, perhaps that's the reason why I got a little bit of an acceleration. But then with that came a stronger appetite for growth. So knowing, some of the plans of the firm's expected anticipated growth, wanting to get more into New York City, so on, came up with a business plan to start and grow a New York City office. We did a lot of work in New York, but without a presence there, again, area codes today are a little bit of I guess, an ancient thing, but 15 years ago, having a 212 area code in a New York address was much more relevant. So being there, was a game changer for clients. So we ventured on the New York City regional office expansion plan, which really just opened a lot of doors for growth. With that, I think it was just having a thirst and appetite to take anything on. You spoke to some unique work we do, and that is a bit of our DNA, our personality, that willingness to pretty much do anything if it has some root in civil or structural engineering services. So knowing that and knowing I had a fantastic team behind me that could solve any problem, felt pretty fearless to go out and grab any project or take on any project, even if I personally had no clue, how to actually solve the problem. I knew I had a team behind me to accomplish that task.
Interesting. No, that's a lot of good stuff there. And, I guess one follow-up question to that is talking a little bit about, like you said, some determination for growth. Once you had some experiences, you kind of wanted to get more experiences. And I'm just wondering do you feel like prior to your career, like you had a determination for growth or motivation like that? Or do you feel like once you engage in some of these opportunities that you saw to be exciting, that kind of grew in you? Because I'm just curious as to some people, I think, have that going into their career. Some people get a taste of it and really want more of it. And I'm wondering what your experience was with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure. I'd have to put myself back into my middle school and high school shoes. I mean, like most engineers, I think a lot of us have that story where, we were good at math and science, so we went into
Right.
engineering. For me, as my brother said, you're really good at math and science. You may want to be a civil engineer. And I said, what the heck is that? But once I got a taste for it, I said, makes sense. Yeah, I think everyone at their core has certain fundamentals and competencies about themselves. I definitely always had a interest in continually learning and developing
Right.
my skills. I would say I didn't know how I would apply them, I think, until I got some of that exposure.
Okay.
I think even the first week on the job, I remember my boss asking me to email clients, and again, putting yourself back and right out of school, not dealing with a client. The first response is, "Oh my God, I have to interact with another human that is hiring us to perform professional services." Just writing that first email could be so intimidating. But once that feedback loop starts building, and you learn and perfect and continue to perform, I think that for me, I would say, built my confidence and built my thirst to do more. And
Mm.
winning one job wasn't enough. Now I had to win two. Now I had to win five. Okay, I got really good at rock and roll stages. Okay, so what else is there? Next thing we're doing alternative energy. Okay, I figured that out. Let me train my successor with alternative energy. Okay, what else can we do? Planetarium domes, cool. Figure it out. Okay, what's next? So I think it's a little bit of my inherent thirst and getting bored very quickly and
Yeah.
just doing one thing over and over again. So I'd say my competency is aligned. Not say perhaps they couldn't have applied to different industries in a similar way, but I would say it was a bit of a build.
Well, that's great. And that's kind of what I was going for in that. I think a lot of engineers out there, maybe in the back of their minds, want to do some of the things you've explained, like engage with clients, grow their careers, help grow their companies. And I think that there's a lot of fear around it. Like you
Yeah.
said, you have low confidence when you graduate. Like, how can I even do that? And I guess so kind of what I was getting at there was that in your case, I think it's a good example of you don't have to be the most confident person in terms of dealing with people when you
Yep.
come out of school, because most engineers aren't, including probably myself and Jeremy. But I think you have to kind of maybe just try to push through it a little bit, get enough confidence to take one small step. And that's also where I think management really comes into play. And we talk about this in a lot of our content at EMI, is that hopefully the manager that you have or the mentor that you have can help you to take that step of, hey, you got it, you can deal with the client, I'm confident in you. And for those of you that are transitioning into managers, maybe that's a message for you too, is that the person that you're managing, depending on what you say to them, may push them to be able to have that conversation with a client to kind of get the flywheel going for them, like Jeremy said. So you keep getting more and more confidence every time you do something else. And so I guess that's really the key point that I wanted to get out of that, was that, Jeremy didn't come out of college and just be like, hey, I can call clients, no problem, do that one thing to the next. It's clear that he had to build up that confidence. And I think everybody has to do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, if I can stereotype, and it's probably somewhat accurate stereotype, I mean, engineers are stereotypically introverts, right? So inherently, we sort of tend to have a head down, crank away mentality. But one good lesson my boss at the time taught me is you got to advocate for yourself always. And for some of us, especially, if we're a bit more modest, we don't like talking about ourselves or what maybe seems as bragging about ourselves. But there is a way to do it without having that tone, right? It's okay to advocate, meaning sell yourself, right? Especially to your manager. And it could be something as simple, an example. I remember, a new opportunity came in through myself at the time, and the manager said, great, good opportunity, give it to, make up a name, Bob. And I said, no, I'm an advocate for myself. I would really like to own this relationship. Bob can do all the work, but I want to be the interface with the client. I want to get that opportunity to grow this relationship and own it. And I think he was happy to see me advocate for myself. He said, okay, great. Right. So if I didn't advocate for myself, I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity. The opportunity would have been lost and move on to the next calculation. But I think you're absolutely right. Be respectful, be humble. But when you see those opportunities, what do you have to lose to say, put your hand up and say, give me an opportunity at that. And I think I can succeed.
Yeah, no, I love that point. I mean, I think it's really important. I mean, I remember as a young engineer, I asked if I could attend the planning board meeting just because I wanted to learn. And I was told that we didn't have enough budget to bring you. And so I just said, whatever, I'll just go like on my own, and I went on my own a few times. And I have to say that the investment, I thought, for me, paid off, because number one, I learned a ton of stuff that I wouldn't have learned about client interaction and why
Oh,
when I
yeah.
drew, when I drew the plans, what my boss was showing them for and how he was presenting them, which helped me like in the office. But also, I think it also showed my company that, hey, this guy like wants to go. I mean, he's coming to meetings on his own at night till, midnight, doing whatever it takes. And I think that you just kind of can't take no for an answer, and you have to say like, like Jeremy said, obviously being respectful at all costs, but like, I want to do this. I feel like I'm capable of doing this and I want to learn about it. And, and you go from there. And I think it is a good message for you in your career for sure. And one other thing that I want to mention just about Jeremy's path, just for context so everyone knows, Jeremy graduated as, I think you got your bachelor's and master's in structural engineering,
Right.
and then
Yep.
came to McLaren. And you've been with McLaren the entire time. And the only reason I say that is because not that it's the only way to do it, but I do think at Jeremy's position in the company, it's helpful that he's kind of been through every stage of his career, kind of with McLaren, to understand some of the things we're going to talk about now in terms of culture and the growth of the firm and stuff like that. Again, not the only way to do it, but I think it is very beneficial for someone who has to kind of lead the company, understand the different facets of it, which kind of leads us into the next thing that I want to talk about. And again, this word culture, is really defined differently by different leaders and organizations. How would you describe culture at McLaren in your own words?
Yeah, good question. I mean, yeah, culture, complicated yet simple word. There's a lot of aspects to it. I mean, it's what is it? It's the personality of a firm. It's the vibe you get when you walk in the door, when you're interact with people. It kind of has some overlap with the word brand, right? What's your brand? Um, you know, Great example being, I remember being in a client's office and I was talking to a woman there, and she said, "Every person I talk to at your firm is so nice." And that was like the best moment of that year,
Yeah.
was that our culture of nice doesn't mean collaborative necessarily, but just how we work with people and how people see us. It was bleeding out to our clients. But culture, it's our personality, right? Some of it is this idea of applied ingenuity, solving any problem. Like I said, when I went to New York City, the roots that I was built on was we can solve any problem. We don't get into MEP or architectural or some of that other stuff, but if it can be solved with a WL squared over 8 or some variation of that, we'll take it on. And so some of that culture is sort of our entrepreneurial mindset of willingness to take on new work, get into new markets, even a new subservice that is associated with our work. But the other aspect of it is the people, right? It's the how we work together. It's cliche to say, we're pro teamwork and working, all for one for all, but those are real things. Now, executing that is not as easy as it sounds. Creating an environment for teamwork, especially in a state of hybrid, can be very challenging. It takes relationships. So, culture is about fostering relationships. It's about how we work together, collaboration, interaction. It's about the energy of solving a problem together. We are an employee-owned firm, so we do believe strongly that success of one is success of all. But on the flip side, a failure of one can be the failure of all. But we're all here to pick each other up and help each other through whatever that challenge may be. But that culture really starts, I think, at the hiring process, right? It's easy to look back and say, why is our culture getting off pace? And then you look at the people and you say, well, how did that person get in the door? They don't align with their culture. And for me, that was a learning process, right? To have the right culture, you need the right people. To have the right people, and that starts when you hire them. And I've always personally believed the hiring process really breaks down very simply. It's really two categories, right? I mean, we're engineers, so you need to have technical competence. Do you need to be perfect? No, but I think you need to have some of the baseline fundamentals. We commonly quiz younger engineers. 100 doesn't mean you get the job, and a 0 doesn't mean you don't. But showing that you have some of those baseline fundamentals is important. But more important, that I think, is that culture of the person, that fit. Do they have a passion for the industry? Do they have a passion for learning and growth? Do they care? It sounds silly, but do they care? They care. Do you think they're going to care about you, your team, your firm? And a lot of times that is a little bit of a gut feel, which, it's hard to pinpoint sometimes. But I've always found people that I know are going to work out well, they sit with me for a few days. And then the people that probably aren't a fit, if you ask me about them 3 days later, I'm saying, who? Oh, right. I did interview that person. So it's a little bit, visceral, and you kind of have a feeling about it. But I find the folks that have that passion, that drive for growth, are always far more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that a lot, that philosophy, especially around hiring. For those of you that maybe tuned in to learn about culture, which may be one of the reasons you're listening, there's a wonderful book that I read not too long ago called The Culture Solution by Matthew Kelly. The subtitle is good as well, A Practical Guide to Building a Dynamic Culture So People Love Coming to Work and Accomplishing Great Things Together. And the reason I mention it here is Jeremy kind of just reminded me of it, because when I opened the book initially to read it, I was thinking more about like what you could do internally to build a culture, but he really talks a lot about hiring, right? Because you could spend all the time in the world creating this great culture within the company, but every day or every week or every month, you're bringing more people into this kind of culture, and they're then impacting the culture, right? They're then
Yes.
shaping it further. So, if you feel really good about your way of life, so to speak, within your company, your culture, and your people and what you've built, you have to kind of maintain that. And an important way of maintaining that is to have some kind of standard for hiring that is ties back into that culture and not just back into, hey, what kind of engineering projects have you worked on? Do you know how to use all these programs and all these other types of things? Yes, those are important as well, but it's really worth spending a little extra time, which I know in some right now, all the companies I talk to are just like running, running, running. We need to hire, hire, hire. And I understand that a lot of work out there. You don't want to lose out
Yeah.
on the work. But at the same time, there's consequences down the road based on how you build your team.
Yeah. And you have to be willing to listen. Nobody gets hiring perfect every time.
No.
Um, so you also then have to be willing to make those hard decisions later on. And I admit, we always haven't been perfect about it, but one bag of egg can really rotten the bunch. If I got that saying right, but you have to be willing to deal with somebody creating a toxic scenario,
Yeah.
and it's hard to do. And especially thinking as a business person, sometimes that person can be driving revenue or sales or
Yeah.
something of that nature. But on the flip side, they could be creating a toxic environment. And those are very hard conversations and decisions to make. But I've always found that once you deal with that and stay true to your culture over some of those other drivers, like perhaps revenue, those other metrics tend to work themselves out. Create the right culture, which a lot harder than it is to just say it, but
Yeah.
create the right culture. I think it will have a positive impact on retention, keeping the good people that ultimately do drive the business in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it takes a good leader to be able to make some of those difficult decisions where there are trade-offs. Like, hey, you know what? This person's been a great bringing in a lot of revenue, but at the expense of, hurting a lot of other people here, and a lot of other people here not being able to work as well with this person. So we need to make a decision. And, one of the words that's come up a lot, Jeremy, and me talking with the CEOs and leaders in the engineering field these days is the word cohesiveness. And, building cohesiveness and culture in any organization today is difficult, as you mentioned earlier, even when people aren't working in person together as much as we used to. However, one way to really, I think, build culture and kind of keep cohesiveness going is to get people together from
Yeah,
time to time. And that's kind of, I think, was maybe one of the original ideas from McLaren Day, or at least that's what McLaren Day served its purpose for when I was there recently. So maybe you can talk about kind of the genesis of McLaren Day and the thought process of how that came about.
sure. And the concept of McLaren Day, to some respect, is predated by 2 years, 2.5 years ago. We did something similar. Then it was just called a all-day, all-company meeting. Um, but similar idea, we brought everybody from all offices together under one roof for a full day of events. In 2020, we did something similar, which is a little more business corporate focused, but then we had an expose where every department got to talk about themselves, showcase what they do, their contributions to the ESOP, and then some morning sessions in the afternoon. And that created a cohesiveness that unfortunately 1 month later we entered COVID, the pandemic. But I do think that cohesiveness made us stronger going into the pandemic.
Mm.
Now, what happened, the pandemic, I think, was much longer than anybody originally anticipated. So that cohesiveness did start to suffer, and as we
Sure.
spend more time like this behind the screen, I think some of those relationships and connections got lost, and then combined with some of the impacts of the Great Resignation, which we felt, and I think our industry overall has felt. So now we have some good people leaving, some great people coming in, but now nobody sort of knows each other. We're not. We have a team of all stars, but we're not cohesive, right? We're the all-star NBA all-star team, but that doesn't mean we're going to win the Olympics. So
Yeah.
we said in our bones, we just knew we had to get back together. We knew we had a world-class team, but they hadn't necessarily worked together, interacted together, collaborated together. So we said we got to go throw all the corporate business stuff to the side. We need a day that's fun, engaging. It's got to have interaction. It's got to remind ourselves a little bit of what our roots are about. Um, we just need a good time disguised in the form of lessons and some orchestrated events. So McLaren Day came about, which was a fantastic day on October 5th. We had probably about 190 people, almost everybody in attendance. Just a fantastic day learning about ourselves. We did some personality, I think a pretty modern, upbeat version of a personality test to learn a little bit about ourselves and how we communicate with other people, how other people like to be communicated to. The afternoon, we had what some may deem as a middle school project, an egg drop, but I think we did a fun spin on it and made it a silly way to really learn about how to work together, collaborate. I think one of the great takeaways was folks learning that ideas come from across the company, not just technical staff. A lot of the non-technical support staff were equally contributing and sometimes even had the better ideas. But I think it was learning how to engage with one another again, having some laughs, accomplishing a mission together, which I think always makes people feel good about themselves. And then, of course, we brought in some fantastic food trucks in the middle of the day, which good food always trumps all.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was an excellent day. And I think what was nice about it was that whenever you have 200 people together for a full day, there obviously is a lot of planning and structure that has to go into it, but it didn't feel very structured during the day, which I think was what we were kind of going for. We wanted people to be comfortable learning about the other people and having fun, really. And I think that was kind of, I know that was Jeremy's directive from the beginning of the planning process, was that the ultimate goal here is for people to have fun, connect, and build relationships, right? Not we have to do a project like this, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to talk about the company XYZ. It was like we have to make sure everyone has fun. And I thought it was great. And some of the stuff that I heard during the day that was just awesome was like to your point, was some people saying, I'm just meeting a bunch of people for the first time that I've been working with, let's say for months or a year, right. Like partially because of COVID, partially because we hired a lot of people over the last year, whatever the case may be, which I think is awesome. Another thing I heard from someone was like, I think they learned something like, my supervisor has like a black belt and I didn't even know that like he did that at all. Like, so you learn things about people personally, which I also think kind of just fosters that word cohesiveness that we were talking about. Cause you feel like, you work with people so much, hours and hours a week. The more I feel like with them and you can connect with them, it just helps you to be more satisfied in what you're doing, which kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. If you're more satisfied, you're going to want to stay with your company and kind of your friends at that point, and help grow that organization. And so I see that as a huge benefit. And the one thing that I'd like to ask about this as well, because there may be some people listening, and I've heard this from some of our clients before, is that, when you put on an event like this, Jeremy, it's obviously a huge financial commitment. Or as I like to call it, an investment, but you've got money and expenses, but you've also got a lot of billable people obviously getting together, not being billable for a day. How does a firm kind of measure something like that? I know it may not be totally possible on a quantitative state, but maybe it goes back to what you talked about a little bit earlier, like with hiring, even with your gut feel and stuff. But, how do you think through something like that as a leader? Like, does it make sense to put this on? How will we know if it worked?
Yeah, it's it's a great question and somewhat impossible to answer right. You know, to measure an ROI in an event like that is what's the metric, right? I mean, you can look at retention and attrition. You know, we've recently did an advanced professional development program, really focusing on investing in our people, and we said, we constantly got asked, what's the metric if you're going to consider it a success? We said, people don't quit, right? If they understand that we're investing in them and their success in this company, and they want to stay here, right? Because if we can get good people to stay here, then all the other problems are solvable. So certainly we look at retention, the engagement, to try to look at the direct impact on revenue and profitability. I mean, those things take time to filter out, so you're never going to be able to pinpoint it back. But it may sound terrible to say, but instinct, gut, I mean, I think you can feel the energy. You see it bleed over into the future. Simple things about now people are connecting on things they didn't connect on before, where people have very directly said, I feel more comfortable reaching out to so-and-so because now I know that person. It sounds crazy, but until you interact in person or know that they have a black belt, right? And you see them more as people
Right.
versus a two-dimensional image on a screen. So it is hard. I mean, yeah, the expense of the day, the food, the tent, and facilitators. I mean, that I would say is fairly nominal. The big cost, like you said, is that lost a day of
Right.
billings. But um, it's pretty simple. When I was managing New York City office, I always thought I had two jobs. One was take care of my clients. The other was take care of my people. And when you do those two things, the other items work out. You're more profitable. You have people stick around longer. People are enjoying their job. So how do you measure that? You can assess all the metrics you want, but the only way is to benchmark perhaps against somewhere that's not doing those things, and which we do, of course, try to do.
Yeah.
But leadership a lot of times is gut instinct and response. And I think we did a survey, and I think we got fantastic remarks, especially the food, across the board after the event, and to me that says a lot.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think a lot of it is the feel of it. And I think as a leader, you kind of have that feel for the company, for your team, and what's going on. And I always think back to an article I read. Peter Thiel, who's like a billionaire venture capitalist. I remember he was a co-founder of PayPal, and then he helped Airbnb raise like a couple $100 million. And when they invited him back, Airbnb, they said, well, listen, you helped us raise a couple $100 million. Like, what do we do with it now? Like, what do you recommend? And basically the only thing he said was, don't F up the culture. Like that was like his message to them. And they were like, well, that's all you're going to tell us? You just helped us raise $200 million. He's like, well, that's the most important thing, essentially. So, and I've heard you kind of, mention the word culture as we were going through the event, designing it, having fun, people are important. And so I think that those are things that, like you have to get a feel for that in your company, whether you're leading a company or leading a team of 5 to 10 people. You can still get a feel even for the culture and the feel of your team, and do things like that with your team. Go out to lunch, get together once in a while, right? Whatever the case may be. I mean, most of the companies that we've worked with that have done well in the hybrid environment have had some kind of schedule where they're getting the people together once in a while, right? Even if it's like, everyone comes in one day a week or whatever the case may be, just kind of continuing to try to build that cohesiveness. So I think that's a really important way to think of it. All right. So Jeremy, just to wrap us up here for today, are there any other takeaways or anything else you want to mention based on your experience with the event or things that have gone on here in the last couple of years or so with McLaren?
Yeah, I mean, I think trust your instinct. I mean, again, we saw a pretty over time direct impact from that loss of cohesiveness to our bottom line. As COVID waned on, you could see it in the numbers. It's always hard to pinpoint to one thing, and then as we start to come back together, you saw the numbers tick up. So I do think that real time data exists, but you gotta trust your instinct, and you gotta stay consistent. I think you gotta, like I said before, sometimes you're forced to make those tough decisions between culture or a metric like revenue. So I think you got to trust your instinct and stay consistent with that. Once you get off that beat, in that example you gave, you're going to sacrifice a lot.
Yeah.
But, I've seen examples, with one of our divisions this year, I saw a drastic turnaround from Q1 of the year through the rest of the year. And I firmly believe the culture of the group, the chemistry of the group changed. It was, I think it was the addition of a hire, perhaps losing one other person. And then all of a sudden the group was just gelling, and the outcome was phenomenal. So the people matter, the chemistry and the culture they create matters. I don't think any of that can ever be underestimated.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy Billig, the CEO, President of McLaren Engineering Group. Jeremy, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thanks, Anthony.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jeremy. Building culture and cohesiveness is everything today to grow a civil engineering firm, and I hope you can take some tips away from Jeremy's experience. Please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis that help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.